as well. And you went, and that was all you said. You just went, you can see me go,
Just hard, isn't it?
Oh, it is. It is.
Team. What's this called? A teapot?
Tea mug.
Tea mug.
In my tea mug.
What's this called? I was going to say tea mug.
Nothing's called a tea mug.
It's a teapot.
It's a teacup and a teapot. So I'm going Mothman today.
Oh, good.
Well, so my left boob is celebrating Mothman, and my right boob is just being a boob because you know.
Well, I'm glad that you mentioned boobs because
I usually do.
Segue. October is Breast Cancer Awareness Month, isn't it?
Yay!
Whoop whoop.
Get your tits out.
Get your tits up. Sound like a builder. Get your tits up.
For the lads.
No. On a more serious note, I wanted to start the episode with something that's very close to my heart, quite literally.
Yes, physically.
And some of you know already that last year I was diagnosed with breast cancer. So I thought I would put my story out there for you guys, just to kind of
make you aware,
spread awareness. Really, it's Breast Cancer Awareness Month. So
yeah.
So last year when I was diagnosed with cancer, I was 31. So at the age of 31, I didn't check myself regularly. I didn't think it applied to me. You know, you see these posts that come up and say about checking yourself, you know, it's on the telly about checking yourself. And I didn't, because I just didn't think it applied to me. I didn't know what I was checking for. I didn't know how to check. And I just, like you say, you don't think it's going to be you, do you?
I think 99% of people are guilty of exactly that. You think it's never going to happen to me. And when you see the posts on Facebook and social media and things like that, you think, I'm going to do that. I'm going to check myself. And then 10 minutes later, you forget.
Yeah. Yeah, because it's just not important. And I understand that because that's exactly my attitude. That was exactly my attitude, is that just, it, you know, I'm not going to have breast cancer, am I? Yeah. So I happened to find my lump by complete accident. I wasn't checking at all. It's that my lump was quite almost on my pec. So it was protruding, and I rubbed my hand on my chest muscle and I found it. And I just, you know, gut instinct, I just knew that it wasn't right. I knew that it was going to be something bad. So I immediately called the doctor. I didn't wait for the next day. I didn't wait for anything. I found the lump. I said to Josie, I found this lump. She checked it out, and then we rang the doctors. And then I was seen by the doctors. I think it was about 2 days later. She examined me and she sent me off to the breast clinic. The breast clinic done an ultrasound and then a biopsy. And they said, on a scale of 1 to 5, 1 being non-cancerous, and that it was a cyst or something, they could tell that, and 5 being definitely cancer, they put me at a 3. So I didn't know. I came away from that appointment having absolutely no idea. And then I had to wait 2 weeks.
That was awful. That 2 weeks.
It's agonizing.
I mean, I don't think you understand. It was awful for me.
Oh, I do apologize.
Yes, thank you.
It was the longest 2 weeks. 2 weeks flies by, doesn't it? And it was just the longest 2 weeks ever. And I was ringing up all of the helplines. So the Breast Cancer Now helpline, Macmillan helpline. And I was saying, you know, if my results come back within 2 weeks, will they call me? Will they call me up to say, you've got cancer, we need to get it sorted? Or will I have to wait the 2 weeks? And I was, you know, constantly Googling, constantly researching everything. And it become almost like an obsession. And you'd spiral into this Google of Googling your symptoms and things. And I did eventually get a phone call. And the lady on the phone said, "Oh, we've got your results back. And I was wondering, we can actually fit you in a little bit earlier." So I said, "Oh, okay. When's that?" She said, "Tomorrow at 9." So I was like, "Oh, okay.
Just tell me now."
Okay. But then everyone was like, I remember my mum saying, "Oh, maybe they just want to get you off the list. They want to tell you the good news and they want to get you off the list." And I was like, "That's not."
You never know, do you?
Not how it works. No. No, but something in me, I was kind of already prepared to receive bad news because it was something very completely different on my body, and I just knew that something wasn't right.
It did actually grow quite quick as well, didn't it?
It grew incredibly quick.
I remember you sending me a picture of it initially.
Yeah.
And then you sent me a picture of it and you said, "This is how it looks at the moment." And sent me a picture of it. And I remember thinking, wow, that's got big quickly.
Yeah. So the reason that it got so big quickly was it was quite an aggressive form of breast cancer, and it was called HER2 positive. And that means that it has got too much of a protein that is a growth protein, and it grows too quickly, and it also fed off my hormones. So because I was 31, I have an abundance of hormones, and it was having an absolute buffet.
Yeah. And it was like, this is great.
This is great. So it grew incredibly fast. And I then, because of that, I had to have quite an intense form of treatment. So the tumor itself was 3 centimeters, which is quite large for a tumor. So it was quite visible, actually, once I'd found it. And so I had to have 7 rounds of intense chemotherapy. I then needed surgery and then radiotherapy. But what shocked me the most was, when you hear cancer, you think of chemotherapy and you think of radiotherapy. But what I didn't know was everything else that I would need. So I needed daily medication to stop my hormones. So because my cancer fed off of hormones, I needed something to stop them. So I needed daily medication to stop my hormones, which puts me into early menopause. I needed injections in my tummy every month, and it's a big needle, really super big needle, and that does something to the pituitary gland, which stops my body from producing hormones. I needed injections in my tummy every day to boost my immune system because the chemotherapy lowers it so much. I needed to take copious amounts of steroids to prepare my body for the chemotherapy. And I needed copious amounts of anti-sickness medication because the chemotherapy made me so sick. I finished the 7 rounds of chemotherapy. I had 6 centimeters of breast tissue removed, which is quite a lot. And I remember having a discussion about whether I would need a mastectomy or whether I would just need that taken out, and there was so many decisions that needed to be made. But they ended up taking out 6 centimeters of breast tissue, and that was from just underneath the skin to the chest wall. It kind of went in a line, and not because when they said 6 centimeters, I imagined like a tennis ball. Yeah. I was like, oh gosh, that's gonna leave a hole.
Yeah.
And so that they took almost like a tube of boob out,
like a core.
That they took out. And then I had 3 weeks of radiotherapy, so every day traveling to an hour away and an hour back to have the radiotherapy. And then I was given the all clear. I am cancer free. I no longer have cancer, which is fantastic, but my oncologist recommended that I have 14 more rounds of chemotherapy, which is a new trial form of chemotherapy, and it dramatically lowers my risk of reoccurrence. So it wasn't mandatory that I had it, but I thought that
well, you said if you didn't have it and it came back, you'd never forgive yourself. So exactly. This gives you a better chance of it not recurring.
Of it never coming back. And all throughout my treatment, my oncologist has been incredibly honest, and they've said that it's a curative measure of treatment that I had. So it's to get rid of the cancer and to stop it coming back. So that, which is, you know, the best that you can hope for.
Yeah.
So yeah, the 14 rounds of chemotherapy. So in total, it'd be 21 rounds of chemotherapy.
That's such a lot.
It's such a lot. But I've got one on Thursday in a few days, and then I've only got 2 left. So it's over a year on now, and I am still receiving treatment. I will be on medication for the next 10 years to keep my body from producing hormones, again, to lower the risk of it coming back. And I just wanted to share my story with you all, so you can kind of understand the importance of regularly checking, because if you can find a lump before it grows and before it spreads, the journey isn't half as bad. Because if my lump hadn't have been so big, I wouldn't have needed the chemotherapy to shrink it. You can just have surgery to remove it. And it's the chemotherapy that's you know, that does the damage. That wasn't nice.
No,
it wasn't.
it wasn't enjoyable.
It wasn't. No, I wouldn't recommend it. But if you follow us on Facebook and on Instagram, you will see that I've shared a post about how to check yourself and how regularly you need to check yourself. And if you don't follow us, then please do, because, you know, we also post hilarious outtakes of us.
Hilarious. But multiple times throughout October we'll be posting about breast cancer awareness, how to check, what to do. I'm going to get on and do it, because I don't do it. And I really should. I'm always talking to you about your boobs, just in general, but I'm still guilty of it. I still do it. I still go, I'm going to give myself regular checks, and then it just flies out of my head, and I think
but it's just so important. And if anybody out there that's listening has been through something similar, or is going through something similar, or knows of someone going through anything similar, feel free to get in touch, because I don't mind speaking about it. I don't mind sharing my story. If I can help anybody, then by all means get in touch. You can email us. The email address is in the show notes, or you can just go on Facebook, go on Instagram. You can message us. I'm more than happy to talk to anybody about anything.
Yeah, even if you're going through menopause, I am starting. This is the real reason that Sarah had these drugs that put her into early menopause, is so that she's got full sympathy for me. So that we can both go through these things together, and that's the real reason. I'm a very empathetic person. You are. You put yourself on a whole year's worth of drugs just so that you can experience early menopause, and we can discuss hot flushes.
So it turns out that once my 10 years is up, I'll be 41, and then I'll come out of my medically induced menopause, and then I'll be at the ripe age to go back into it. Yeah.
And by then I'll be well old and crispy. So I'll be like, I don't remember. Do you remember? I'll be like, no. I've got one thing that I wanted to ask you. Random blam, go.
Oh, you know what? I'd forgotten. Oh, you tricked me there.
I did. I went into character and everything.
So, you know, every Tuesday when the new episode comes out, Josie always goes to work, and then she'll ring me about something to do with the podcast. She said to me, she was like, how on earth did you think that you could follow up Kate's random blam with yours? And I was like, I don't even remember what they were. She went like, Kate's random blam was that you knew Arnold Schwarzenegger. And I followed it up with, I have an allotment. And I was like, I'm not cool.
I'm not that cool.
I'm not cool.
Do you know, I didn't even think of that.
Yeah.
I mean, mine was a very, very cool blam.
Yours was a very cool blam. I was like,
cool.
I don't know Arnold Schwarzenegger, but I do have an allotment.
I've got an allotment where I've got some onions.
And garlic.
Oh yeah. I mean, I love allotments and onions and garlic, so.
I don't know if I've got a random blam.
Gosh.
I love doing puzzles. Give me a puzzle any day of the week. Absolutely love doing a puzzle.
What, jigsaw?
Jigsaw puzzle.
Oh.
Yeah, love them.
Have you done the baked bean one?
No.
That's a tricky one.
Yeah. I would do it though.
Just
because I'm stubborn.
Because yes, exactly. Just because you won't be beaten by baked
Yeah, exactly.
beans.
Yep.
Baked beans.
Right, go on. Random blam, you go. What other celebs do you dine with?
Okay. Here's another celeb one then.
Oh, I was joking.
When I was 16, I went on the show called The Big Breakfast. I don't know if it was even around. It was hosted by Chris Evans and Gabby Rosland. And I went on there when Chris Evans was away for a week, which is fine because I'm not a fan. And in his place, hosting the Big Breakfast for the week was Take That.
Oh, really?
When we came out, there was a whole, because it was recorded on like a house that was next to a lock. On the other side of the lock was about 10,000 screaming teenage girls. And I was like, not bothered.
What are they here for? I'm not that cool.
Yeah. And I was like, please. And as we were about to walk out and leave, Robbie Williams came out and put his arm around me, leant me back, gave me a great big snog in front of said 10,000 screaming teenage girls, which I then had to walk through.
Oh.
So, yeah, not impressed by that. I
was
also,
like, Robbie, that's a bit much.
Yeah, I know. I was 16, man.
Yeah.
Mind you, I think he was only like, I don't know, 20 or something. But...
Yeah. Also, do you realise what you've just done there?
Oh, what?
I don't know if you realise how you're making me come across, Kate, but you've just said that you've dined with Arnold Schwarzenegger and Take That.
Schwarzenegger?
Yeah. And Take That. And on my random blams are, I love doing puzzles.
And you've got an allotment.
And I've got an allotment. Oh.
Yeah, but I think those are cool.
It's not cool, is it? I'll try and come up with something a bit cooler next time.
Okay. And I'll come up with something less cool.
Please. Thank you.
Oh, welcome. Blam's done. Any other business?
No.
Oh, I have got something actually. And I meant to say this a few weeks ago, and every time we go on air, I forget. But one of my friends in America, it was so cool. She said, "Hi, Kate. I heard you mentioned that you love Stephen King on the podcast. I went and saw his house recently when I was in Maine, and she sent me some pictures, which are
Stephen King's house.
Stephen King's actual house.
Oh, okay.
House.
Cool.
And look at his gates of his house.
Yeah, I see them.
Isn't that cool?
Yeah.
So she's very kindly sent me some pictures. Spooky.
Is that Mothman?
Mothman. Yeah, it's a bit like that, isn't it?
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yes. So I will absolutely treasure these pictures because I love Stephen King. And thank you very much, Ruth. And thank you for continuing to listen. And I'm sorry about my language. I'll try and not swear.
Try and be better.
Oh, I'm having a hot flush now. Oh, put my fan on. Morning, everyone. I hope you are all well.
So today's episode,
I
am doing a story that generally I wouldn't normally do, and it is the exorcism of Roland Doe.
Hmm.
Now, we all know of the classic 1973 horror film, The Exorcist.
We do.
We do know that film. So the film, it tells the story of a young girl who is possessed by a demonic force. And it's one of the highest grossing horror films of all time. And critics praised it as a truly terrifying film experience. But many people don't realise that this particular horror film was actually inspired by a true story.
Oh.
So today I am going to tell you of that story.
Cool.
So Roland Doe is an alias given to the boy by one of the priests that performed the exorcism. The priest, Raymond Bishop, decided to keep a daily journey of the exorcism so that it could be studied at a later date. And also
a daily journey or a daily journal?
Journal. Is that what I said?
No, you said journey.
A daily journal of the exorcism so that it could be studied and used to help others in a similar or same situation. After the exorcism, the journal eventually found its way to writer Thomas B. Allen. And Thomas was, this was in 1990 when by the time the diary had found its way to Thomas. And he was actually researching cases for a book that he was writing called Possessed. So what he managed to do on reading through this journal was to actually corroborate the story. So he could factually put it together based on the amount of witnesses that were in this journal. There was over 40 witnesses to this exorcism. Yes. And what Thomas did was to go around and find these people and corroborate the story. So after a long time of searching the vaults of the internet, I managed to find the diary.
Yes.
Yes, I did. So Roland was born into a German Lutheran family during the 1940s. And the family lived in Cottage City in Maryland. And according to the diary left by the priest, Roland was an only child. And so therefore decided he depended upon the adults around him. So the adults in the household, including his aunt. He was very, very fond of his aunt Harriet. She had actually been a spiritualist. So she had shown Roland how to use a Ouija board. And so when she suddenly died and left Roland completely heartbroken, it wasn't really a surprise that he actually tried to use the Ouija board in order to make contact with her.
Oh.
Roland's family said that it was shortly after this that strange things started happening in their house. On January the 15th, 1949, 13-year-old Roland and his grandmother were alone in the house when they started hearing dripping noises coming from the grandmother's bedroom. The pair went to investigate and decided that there must be a leaky pipe somewhere. The noise continued for a short time, and then the picture of Christ on the wall shook, as if the wall had been kind of like banged from the other side, as if someone had bumped into it and it kind of like jogged the picture of Christ. And they didn't really know what to make of it. It never happened before. They just decided that it was nothing and they carried on with their evening. But by the time Roland's parents returned home from their evening out, there was a very definite scratching sound under the floorboards near the grandmother's bed.
Nope.
Roland's father assumed that there was possibly an infestation of rats or mice in the house, and he would call an exterminator. The exterminator was called in, and he found no evidence or no sign of rats or mice, but he continued to place poison under the floorboards just in case. From that night on, the scratching was heard every night about 7 o'clock in the evening and would continue until midnight. The scratching continued for 10 days and then all of a sudden stopped. So the family believed that the poison had worked and that the rats had died. But Roland could still hear it. The rest of the family heard nothing for a period of 3 days. And when the noise started up again, it was different. It was no longer in the grandmother's bedroom upstairs, but it had moved downstairs into Roland's bedroom. The noise, it kind of sounded like squeaking shoes walking along the bedroom. And it was heard only at night and only when Roland went to bed. The squeaking shoe walking sound continued for 6 nights. And then on the 6th night, the scratching started up again.
Oh, God.
On that night, Roland's mother and grandmother decided to stay in the bedroom with him. And while lying on his bed, they all heard a noise, kind of as though it was coming closer to them. They described it as similar to the rhythm of marching feet and the beat of drums. And this sound, it would travel from the bottom of the bed, up the length of the mattress towards the 3 of them, and back down again. And it happened over and over and over until Roland's mother decided to say, "Is that you, Aunt Harriet?" The sound stopped. So the mother continued to ask questions. And she said, "If you are Aunt Harriet, knock 3 times."
What you're going to say, if you are Aunt Harriet, knock it off.
Fuck off.
Or fuck off, Aunt Harriet.
So the family described that each of them in turn was struck with a wave of air directly in the face. And that was followed by 3 distinct knocks heard on the floor of the bedroom. So the mother asked again, "If you are Aunt Harriet, tell me positively by knocking 4 times." 4 distinct knocks were heard on the floorboards, followed by the sound of scratching on the bottom of the mattress that all 3 of them were sitting on.
Oh, no. Oh, my goodness.
From that
Monster
day on,
under the bed.
From that day on, the boys' bedroom became a hub of activity. While Roland was trying to sleep in his bed, the clawing sound on the mattress would start, and when no attention was paid to it, the mattress would begin to shake. The family said that at times the activity could be quite violent, and on one occasion, the cover of the bed was swiftly pulled up, and it hovered over the bed in like a curved shape, and the mother said it was almost as if it had been held up by starch. And when she kind of went to touch it to find out what was going on, it just fell softly back onto the bed. In the diary, there is a small section that just says other manifestations, and it gives an overview of kind of what the family were going through at the time. And it says that when Roland entered the kitchen, an orange and a pear flew across the room to where the boy was standing. The kitchen table would shudder and vibrate. Milk and other food items were thrown off the stove, and the table and the breadboard was thrown onto the floor. Outside the kitchen, a coat flew off its hanger towards Roland, and a comb flew very violently across the living room and towards a blessed candle where it was then extinguished.
Goodness.
A Bible was thrown directly at Roland. And while at school, Roland's desk would kind of shudder and vibrate, and it would kind of move across the floor. And at first, teachers would reprimand Roland, but it kept happening. So it got to the point where actually he stopped going to school. At one point, the family decided to leave the house and stay with friends in a different town. They suspected that if it was in fact Roland doing all of these things, then he wouldn't be able to carry on in an unfamiliar house. However, shortly upon their arrival, Roland took a seat in a rocking chair, and it immediately began to vibrate and spin so out of control that Roland was thrown out of it. The family tested the chair and found that it was incredibly heavy. It was made of solid wood. It was like a solid wood rocking chair, and there was no way Roland could have moved it in such a way. The family eventually sought the help and advice of 2 Lutheran ministers. One of the ministers wanted to observe the phenomena himself, so he invited Roland over to his house, again away from his familiar surroundings. And during the night, the same clawing sounds could be heard in the bedroom of the minister. The minister prayed, but it seemed to make things worse. At one point, the minister tied Roland to a chair to see if the noises stopped. He believed that Roland was the source of all of this. But the chair that Roland was tied to tipped over with Roland still in it, still completely tied. The family were advised to call a psychiatrist and have the boy examined. The psychiatrist did not believe in spirits, and he reported that Roland was a very normal 13-year-old boy. A spiritualist was called to rid the house and the boy of the spirit, but he said that he was completely out of his depth, and so a priest was called. Oh. Father Hughes, Catholic priest of St. James's Parish, was asked for his advice. So he suggested setting up blessed candles around the home, sprinkling holy water in all of the bedroom, and praying. All of which Roland's mother tried. The blessed candles were lit all around Roland's bed, as that's where like the majority of the activity happened. But as soon as they were lit, they were being extinguished. Holy water was sprinkled in all of the rooms, and when she was finished with the holy water, she placed it on a shelf, and the bottle was sent flying across the room. Father Hughes decided that the boy needed an exorcism, and so asked his superiors at the church. And in late February, Father Hughes was granted permission to perform an exorcism on Roland.
Because that's quite a big deal, isn't it?
It's a huge deal, yeah.
To be granted permission to actually carry out an exorcism is not as simple as, you know, just popping down to your local church and saying, you know, I don't suppose you'd drop by later. They have to get like permission from the Vatican and things like that, don't they? It's quite a
lengthy process.
Yeah.
But surrounded by 14 eyewitnesses, these were family members of Roland's and other members of the church, Roland was strapped, arms and legs, spread eagle, onto the bed. Oh. Father Hughes had barely gotten into the exorcism when Roland began to grow very agitated. He screamed in anger and he thrashed around, and before anyone could do anything, Roland had broken an arm free of its restraints, and he'd managed to break off a piece of a metal spring from his mattress. Jeez. And he slashed the priest across the arm. Ooh. And it was from shoulder to hand, all the way down. The exorcism was immediately halted, and Father Hughes was taken to the hospital, where he received over 100 stitches. Jeez. And lost the full use of his hand.
What, for good?
Yeah.
Oh.
Yeah. Well, done damage to the nerves and stuff.
Oh, blah.
Flashed all the way down. On February 26th, 1949, the scratching, clawing sounds in Roland's bedroom took on a new, more shocking form. Scratches started to appear all over Roland's body, and this continued for 4 nights in a row. And on the 4th night, the scratches turned into letters. And in Father Bishop's diary, it says that these letters were clear and seemed to have been scratched on the body by claws. So with the spirits kind of now taking on a violent physical form, Roland's mother started to think about taking her son and her family to St. Louis, where she had grown up. Her whole family still lived there. She'd grown up there, and she was kind of surrounded by more familiar people. So she'd been thinking about moving her family there. And one evening, before she'd made her decision, a word appeared on Roland. In deep red scratches right across his ribs were the word Lewis.
Lewis?
So it was decided that evening that the boy would be taken to St. Louis. And over the next few days, while the family were preparing for their trip, more words began to appear on Roland. The word Saturday was scratched into his hip. So the family took that to mean that they would have to leave on the Saturday. And the next evening, another message appeared. On the boy's chest, the numbers 3 and then 1/2 had been painfully carved in. And the family took that as a message that they should stay for 3.5 weeks.
Oh, God. Something's using him as like a block of Post-it notes.
A chalkboard.
Yes. Write your note somewhere else. Why do you have to carve it into him? Jeez.
Each time a message would appear on Roland, he would double over and scream in agony. These weren't light scratches. They were deep claw marks. And the family was sure that he was not doing that himself. Not only because the family generally watched Roland closely, but the letters and scratches would also be found on his back, the backs of his arms and legs. And they were just places that he just wouldn't be able to reach. So the family were now staying at relatives' houses in St. Louis. And the different phenomena that were happening was now being witnessed by more people. So 2 aunts of the boy, 4 uncles, and 4 cousins.
Blimey.
The writing being carved into Roland's body didn't stop. The words "no school."
Oh God.
I've been possessed.
Oh, it scared the shit out of me then.
Looking over me as well now.
The words "no school." Hello.
Sorry about that.
Blimey. Ooh.
Little frog in my throat there.
Yeah, I know Halloween's coming up, but steady on. Scaring the poop out of me. Oh, the words "no school."
Like a demonic possession taking over.
Jesus,
I tell you what, while I was writing this, next to me, my phone went off and it played a tune that it had no business playing. I don't know what it was. It wasn't a song. It was a tune. And it was just sat next to me. And I held it up and I went, Josie!
Josie! Help! God.
And then again, while I was writing this episode, you know, when Netflix, it was just on, nothing was playing, but the home screen of Netflix was on. It come up, The Exorcist, like to watch.
Jeez.
Yeah.
Something's listening to us and I don't like it.
Yeah.
Right. So, yeah, you were saying about no school.
No school.
No school. Oh,
I don't think I'll be able to get through that bit, am I?
no. No school. That came out of nowhere, didn't it?
I don't know why these things keep fucking happening to me.
Possessed, mate.
The writing being carved into Roland's body didn't stop. The words "no school" were witnessed by 4 different people. The moving of the mattress and bed where Roland was sleeping, the scratching, the clawing sounds all continued just as routinely as they had done back in their own house. After witnessing these distressing events, one of Roland's cousins decided to speak to her professor about it. Her professor was Father Bishop, so he listened to everything that the girl told him about Roland, and he said that it sounded like a diabolical possession, which is the possession of the body by the spirit of a devil or demon. Father Bishop was a very well-educated man. He was an academic and was rightly very skeptic, and so he wanted to see firsthand these events. So Bishop went to Roland, and he was there for 8 days, and he kept a detailed diary of the events of every night that he was there. So this is where Bishop enters. So everything in his diary beforehand is just accounts from his family.
Right.
From here on is what Bishop actually witnessed. So the first night, Monday the 7th of March, 1949, he observed Roland as being a very normal teenage boy. But then 11 p.m. came and it was time for Roland to go to bed. The same as every night beforehand, the noises started, and from downstairs, Bishop could hear the banging and the clawing and the scratching, and he rushed upstairs towards the bedroom. Roland was laid motionless on the bed, the mattress and bed shaking beneath him. Father Bishop sprinkled the boy and the bed with holy water, and the shaking immediately stopped. But within seconds, Roland began to scream in agony. He lifted up his pajama top, and before their very eyes, large red scratches and welts began to form on his torso. According to Father Bishop's diary, he said that it looked like something was clawing from the inside, trying to get out.
Oh, that's hideous.
So the next day, Tuesday the 8th, I'll read this one word for word as it is in the diary, because it's written in quite an old-fashioned way, so I've generally reworded a lot of things. But this one, word for word, is what's written in the diary. And it says, at the home of R's Catholic aunt, so R being Roland,
right,
2 cousins and non-Catholic uncle. Shaking of mattress, scratching, stool upset several feet away from the bed. Phenomena observed by cousin who spent the night with R. Mattress continued to move in the direction of the uprights of the bed, even when cousins lay alongside of R. All other members of the family observed the violent shaking of the mattress and heard the scratching sounds. So Wednesday the 9th is much of the same. Father Bishop blessed Roland's bedroom and mattress, but the bed continued to shake. And he states that this went on for 15 minutes. And during that time, there were 6 other occupants in the room observing the events. The next night, a sacred relic had been placed over Roland's bed, and this was thrown to the floor, and the sound of scratching continued. On the Friday, it says shortly after Roland had gone to bed at 11 o'clock, he called downstairs that he'd been frightened by a strong force that had thrown some objects against the mirror in his bedroom. The relic of St. Margaret Mary had been thrown against the mirror, and the sound was like a pallet striking glass. Another occurrence was a cross mark scratched on Roland's left outer forearm. The cross remained evident for approximately 45 minutes. A bookcase was moved from alongside the bed, and it was turned completely around, facing the entrance to the room. The stool at the dressing table moved from the table to the bed, which was about 2 feet in distance. The stool was moved back to its position by one of the family members, and within a few moments, it had turned itself over. So it just flung itself on the floor. The next few nights continued with the very same pattern. The bed shaking, the rhythmic scratching, as sometimes it would last for 15 minutes, at other times it would continue for 2 hours. The bedroom furniture was moved around, the stool was flung across the room. You know, any relics that they tried to place in Roland's bedroom was always flung across the room. So, having seen the events firsthand, Father Bishop decided that he was completely out of his depth. So he enlisted the help of Father William S. Bowden. William Bowden told Father Bishop that there were 3 stages of possession. The first stage is something known as infestation, and this is where the spirit infiltrates the life of the victim in various ways. The victim will start hearing footsteps and doors opening, furniture moving, scratching on surfaces, and it's said that interacting with a spirit at this stage can lead to possession. If you interact with the spirit, you're inviting it in, and this immediately leads to stage 2. So stage 2 is something called oppression, and oppression is the mental effects of the demonic influence. So the victim will begin to feel depressed. People can become sick and tired, like exhausted, physically and mentally worn out. Sometimes they will have severe nightmares, and it's almost as if like a dark cloud descends upon the person. And then the third and final stage is possession, and this is where the victim is acting in a way that is quite obviously isn't them. Both Bishop and Bowden believed that the boy was in the second stage of possession, with precursors to the third stage. So they wanted to act fast before the demon spirit could fully take hold and possess Roland. So they contacted the local archdiocese to gain permission to perform an exorcism. He agreed, but with 2 conditions. They had to keep their work completely confidential. And also, Father Bowden had to do the exorcism. Those were the 2 conditions. But Father Bowden outright refused. He did not want to confront the demon. He did not want to be part of it. He didn't think that he was experienced enough, and he did not want to be in charge of what happened to Roland. However, The exorcism could only be performed by someone of Bowden's experience. So he was told, it's you or no one.
Mm.
So on Wednesday, the 16th of March, the exorcism began. Shortly after 10 p.m, Roland was sent to bed. Father Bishop, Father Bowden, Roland's mother, his uncle, and an aunt were called into the bedroom to prepare for the exorcism. All those present knelt beside Roland's bed, and acts of faith, hope, love, and contrition were recited together in prayer. Roland was awake, and the bedroom light was on. He had his hands outside the bed covers. As soon as Father Bowden started reading the Principio, which is part of the exorcism where the priest demands that the spirit identify himself.
Okay. 3
large parallel bars were scratched onto Roland's stomach. From then on, more scratches appeared, and Roland screamed in agony as angry red welts started to appear on his legs, his thighs, his stomach, back, chest, face, and throat.
Oh my God. If I was Roland, I'd have been like, for the love of God, stop asking it questions.
Some were thin, light scratches that he said hurt no more than pinpricks, but others were red and raised and bloody. And he said that they felt like almost a brand had been placed on his skin. They burned. Father Bowden again demanded that the spirit identify itself, and in large bloody red letters the word hell was slashed across Roland's chest, and a picture of the devil appeared in red on his right leg.
Goodness.
Father Bishop's diary says that the picture of the devil, his arms were held above his head and his hands seemed to be webbed, giving the appearance almost like of a bat. And he said that everyone in the room agreed that this image could not be mistaken for another. They were dealing with a malevolent spirit from the depths of hell.
Oh, Mothman.
During the course of the evening, the word go was branded on Roland and the letter X. And Father Bowden and Bishop took this to mean that the exorcism would have to take place over 10 days. They assumed that the spirit was saying that it would go, and that the X wasn't just an X, it had the bars on the top of the, so it was like 10. A Roman numeral 10. The exorcism was going to take place over 10 days. But they didn't know if they could put Roland through that for 10 days. It was like a torture for him.
Yeah.
And throughout that evening of the first evening of the exorcism, Roland received as many as 25 different wounds. During the next phase of the exorcism that night, Roland fell into a deep sleep. He was quiet and peaceful. No more scratches appeared and everything seemed to be going well until Father Bowden started reciting prayers to St. Michael. Roland's eyes immediately shut open, and with a strength that was not his own, he lashed out and he hit the backboard of the bed, and his arms and his legs were like violently throwing about, and he was just trying to hit anything within reach. He was pinned down to the bed by 2 men, and he began shouting insults and threats of violence at them, spitting at them, and with his unnatural strength, he was able to free himself on multiple occasions. The last phase of the night, which happened at around 4 or 5 a.m, Roland had fallen limp and weak from his struggles and was in an apparent sleep. And he began to sing in a high-pitched voice the songs Old Man River and Swanee, which is a song I've not heard of. The diary said that the songs weren't complete, but almost like garbled versions. But in this state, Roland did not have to be subdued, and he was very calm and he was very relaxed. The next night, similar events happened, although this time there were no scratches or clawings appearing on Roland's body. He had to be restrained each time Father Bishop blessed him with holy water. He would fling his arms and legs out of the bed. He would shout abuse at those around him, and he spat directly into the face of his mother, his father, and his uncle.
Oh, dirty boy.
After each time, he would be completely exhausted, and he would fall asleep at around, that night he fell asleep at around 1:30. The priests left the home that morning with their heads hung low. They knew now that the boy was indeed in the third stage of possession. The evil spirit had fully taken hold of Roland. On the third day, the prayers of the exorcism were continued, and Roland was once again taken over by the spirit. He began to struggle with his pillow and the bed quilt. His arms, legs, and head had to be held by 3 men. The contortions, that word is used a lot in the diary. His body contorted, and it said that it revealed physical strength beyond the natural power of Roland. He again spat at the priest. He spat at the relics that were being shown to him, and he writhed in agony under the sprinkling of holy water, and he fought and screamed in a diabolical, high-pitched voice. He screamed violence at those around him, and he managed to set himself free from the 3 men that were holding him down. And he jumped up onto the bed and would swing his fists at the priest. And Father Bishop said that his face was devilish, and he snapped his teeth in fury. He snapped at the priest's hands in the blessing, and he bit anybody that tried to hold him down. By 12 midnight that night, there were signs of change. Roland stood up in his bed, and then he dropped to his knees and quietly went through the prayers with Father Bowden. While he went through these prayers, all of a sudden, Roland rose up, and Father Bishop said it looked like he began a strong fight for the eviction of the devil. He gyrated in all directions. He pulled off the upper part of his underwear, and he held his arms high above his head. Then he made as though he was trying to vomit from his stomach. He gestured almost from his stomach as if he was trying to get the spirit up, out, like into his throat.
Yeah.
He asked that the window be opened, and then in a happy, victorious mood, he said sweetly, "He's going." And then finally, he said, "There he goes." And his body fell limp upon the bed in a perfectly relaxed condition. In a moment, he was normal, and he seemed relieved, and he seemed like he was kind of back to himself. The whole family knelt beside the bed and said prayers of thanks. Thinking that their job was done now, Fathers Bishop and Bowden set off out of the house. They were quite happy that Roland was free of the spirit, and at 1:30 a.m. they left the house. But about 2 a.m. or a little after, Roland felt strange. He said he felt a strange sensation in his stomach, and in a few moments he began to call out fearfully, "He's coming back, he's coming back."
No.
The priests were called back to the home, and the exorcism continued until 7 a.m. the next morning, when, exhausted, Roland finally fell asleep. It was now Saturday, and the exorcists arrived at Roland's home at 7 p.m. after only leaving the house at 7 a.m. that morning. And at 8 p.m, the exorcism began again. Father Bishop's diary states that Roland shouted violently with fiendish laughter. The shouting resembled the barking of a dog, and Roland snapped his teeth, and he says it was truly diabolical. Roland had also started deliberately urinating on himself and used many profanities towards the fathers. I will tell you some of the profanities.
Oh, keep it clean.
Yeah, in the diary, it literally says some of the vulgarity follows. It says, "Get away from me."
Oh, filthy boy.
Absolute profanities. "You assholes."
Oh, goodness.
"Go to hell, you dirty sons of bitches."
Oh.
"God damn you, sons of bitches, you dirty assholes."
Oh.
So they were just some of the things that were being shouted at the priests.
Goodness.
And during the stages when Roland was kind of a bit quieter, not shouting these profanities, he would still sing to himself different songs that he had like no business knowing. He was a 13-year-old boy. He didn't enjoy singing. He couldn't sing. However, The voice that came out of him was incredibly soulful, and Father Bishop remarked in his diary on the professionalism of his voice. And when Roland was actually lucid, when he was himself, one of the fathers hummed one of these songs, but Roland was unable to carry on the melody, and he said, I don't know what you're doing. I don't know what that is.
I don't know what's happening here, but I'm not going to be a part of it.
What are you doing?
Yeah.
He didn't know the song. He had no idea what the song was. On the 10th night, Roland was taken to the college church rectory. Father Bowden thought it best to perform the exorcism at a sacred place. He'd had obviously 9 nights of not really any success, so he thought he'd do things a little bit differently.
Mm-hmm.
But it turned out to be the worst of the nights by far. They began the exorcism. The
Final
unnatural
night, isn't it? Big finale. It's the final night.
The final
10
night.
nights. Yeah.
The unnatural strength possessed Roland again, and he broke one of the witnesses' nose and also made another father's nose bleed. He was restrained by 4 men. He urinated on himself at least 4 times that night, and he shouted at other priests that he would see them in hell. His behaviour became vulgar and shocking, and it's a little bit vulgar and shocking, but I'm going to quote it directly from the diary from that night. And it says, "The vile and filthy talk which followed makes anyone shudder. Roland spoke of his penis as a beautiful pecker, a willy-dilly-pilly, so round, so firm, with a red top and a hole in the middle. He pulled the towel from his loins and shook his body in a suggestive and shimmy fashion. His expressions were lowly and smacked of the abuse of sex. Roland spoke of kissing his pecker and using the stick for pleasure. Then he would say, 'Isn't it pretty?' He turned upon the priests at his bedside. 'You have big pricks too, and you like to rub them up and down. You have big teats, you big ox.' Then followed a sucking sound. He called to the exorcist to 'cut out the damn Latin and get away from me, you goddamn bastards.'"
Goddamn bastards.
Filth. Filthy spirit.
Yes. I don't approve of all this penis talk.
No. Eventually, Roland began to become quieter and calmer, and eventually fell into a sleep at around 1 a.m. For the next few nights, Roland was at peace. He wasn't visited by the spirit at all, and Father Bishop's diary says that there were no disturbances that occurred Monday, Tuesday, or Wednesday night, and Roland was getting back to normal life. However, on Thursday, the 31st of March, at 11:30 p.m, Roland went downstairs and complained to his mother that he was feeling ill and that his feet were cold and then hot. And when the family went up to the bedroom with him, the disturbances began. First, the shaking of the bed, and then Roland began to write on his bedsheet just with his finger. And he was kind of lucid, so sometimes he would be himself, and then other times he would go like into a trance. And in between these trances, when he was himself, he explained that it was almost like he was reading from a blackboard. They were unable to make out what he was writing on the sheet, but then he began to talk, and his cousin took notes of what he was saying, and he said, "I will stay 10 days, but will return in 4. If you stay and become a Catholic, I will stay away. God will take it away 4 days after it has gone 10 days. God is getting powerful. The last day when it quits, I will leave a sign on my front. Father Bishop, all people that mangle with me will die a terrible death." So the priests were called again, and it was decided that Roland would be baptized as a Christian. They assumed that the spirit had been talking through Roland, and he said that if you stay and become a Catholic, I will stay away. So they took that to mean a sign that they should baptize Roland. So the family packed up the car and readied themselves for the trip to the rectory where they'd performed the previous exorcism. But as soon as Roland was in the car, he entered into one of these trances, and he began to say, "So, You're going to baptize me? And you think that will drive me out with Holy Communion? Roland became enraged and he grabbed the steering wheel of the car, and his uncle was forced to pull up to the curb in order to subdue the violence. Roland stiffened, and again that they said that he fought with an unnatural strength, and it was a massive task to remove him from the front seat where he'd climbed over and to force him into the back of the car. Roland's father and uncle, they held him in the back seat while his aunt drove. And even while restrained, Roland managed to break free of his uncle and his father, and he seized his aunt around the throat and began to strangle her.
Oh, blimey.
Another interesting note that the family said in the diaries was that the radio in the car would not operate while Roland was in one of these trances.
Oh, really?
It worked the rest of the time, but as soon as Roland went into this trance, the radio would stop working. And when the family finally arrived at the college church rectory, Roland entered into another trance, and he made it virtually impossible to get him out of the car, and it took 3 men to carry Roland inside the rectory. Once inside, he spat and he shouted obscenities and he threw himself onto the floor. And his father and his uncle were absolutely exhausted from the struggle just from the car to the inside of the rectory. Yes. The baptism itself was just as difficult, and it took 4 tries between Roland going into these trances and coming out. It took 4 tries for him to go through the baptism and to do his Holy Communion. That evening, the exorcism continued, and it did every night for the next 2 weeks.
Oh my God.
Each night brought about the same occurrences as before. The violent screaming, the vulgar language, the taunting and the singing. And Father Bowden didn't think it could take much more. He didn't think that the boy could stand the nightly routine any longer. He was exhausted, and Roland had started to become fearful that he was going mad. He thought that he was going insane, and he just didn't see an end to it. He thought that the spirit would just never leave him. But on April 17th, which happened to be Easter Sunday, Father Bowden had a new resolve. He would rid this boy of the evil that was inside of him. Father Bowden read the rites of the exorcism quietly. He decided that instead of reading the words in Latin, he would read them in English. Instead of shouting and demanding things, he would do it gentler. And he said that Roland also seemed to have like a new fight within him. And whenever he wasn't in a trance with the spirit coming out, he would pray with all of his might. And it seemed that every time now that he went into a trance, it wasn't quite as violent. He would still throw things across the room, like a crucifix had been placed into his hand and he would just throw it, or the Bible that they was reading from would be thrown across the room. And for the first time throughout the exorcism, Father Bowden said he felt like he was actually winning. At 10:45 that night, amongst the prayers being read by the priest and amongst the screams of Roland, a voice came out of the boy that was neither his own nor the demon's. It spoke in a clear, demanding tone and said, "Satan, Satan, I am St. Michael, and I command you, Satan, and the other evil spirits to leave the body in the name of Dominus immediately, now." And with that, Roland contorted in the most horrific way since the exorcism began on the 16th of March. He screamed in agony, and his body bent in a way that was completely unnatural. His back arched off the bed and contorted so much that his shoulder blades almost touched the soles of his feet.
Oh my God, that's hideous.
Eventually, the screaming subsided and Roland fell back onto the bed, exhausted, and in a quiet voice that was his own, he just said, "He's gone," and he fell into a deep sleep. The spirit had finally left Roland's body. Roland went on to live out the rest of his life completely normally. He was a NASA engineer and he lived until he was 86.
Goodness.
And as mentioned at the beginning of the episode, Roland's experience was the inspiration behind the Exorcist book and film. William Peter Blatty, who was the writer, came across the story of Roland while at a university in Georgetown, where one of the fathers that had attended the exorcism was giving a lecture on it. So despite the promise to keep the exorcism secret, he just couldn't. What he'd witnessed was too much. So he decided to give a lecture on it. And that is how William Peter Blatty came upon the story. So although the scratching and the shouting and spitting and cursing in the movie mimicked what Roland had experienced, the boy's head never turned 360 degrees like Regan's did in the film. Similarly, Roland never vomited green, nor did he use the crucifix in such a manner.
Yes.
as in the film.
Enough said. But it did start with like what sounded like a dripping pipe, didn't it? Which I can hear coming through my headphones from yours.
Can you hear a dripping tap?
What is dripping in
my
yours?
tap is dripping.
Told you.
My tap is actually dripping, so I do apologise.
Right, well, phone me later and let me know that you're all right.
Yeah.
I mean, you've already been kind of possessed reading this, so.
Yeah. So that is the account, that diary that I read sort of passages from. There was
that's awesome.
There was a lot to it, and like I say, that it went on for 2 extra weeks, and in those 2 weeks, every day the exorcism is detailed, and it's very much the same as what went on in the rest of the evenings, the rest of the night of the exorcisms. But when that diary was given to Thomas B. Allen, who was the writer that was doing the research for his book Possessed, he, like I say, he went round to these witnesses and he corroborated their story. So nobody really knows what happened to little Roland.
There's so much proof that says that it's a real thing and it happens and people get possessed. Don't know. What do you think? Do you believe it?
I don't know. I really enjoyed researching this episode because there was so much to it, and I did really enjoy it, researching it and writing it. But when I was writing it, it was almost as if I was just telling a story. Not like it was happening or it happens to a little boy. It was just as though it was a story, because that is kind of how it seems. So although factually I couldn't discount it, I don't know.
I know. It's weird, isn't it?
Yeah,
bizarre. Well, after today's episode, which I thoroughly enjoyed, I'm going to do just 3 translations for our listeners. So this is a translation from Sarah to English. First word, observed. In English, it's observed. Sarah, journey. English, journal. Sarah, very skeptic. In English, skeptical. And that's today's translations. You are welcome.
Why don't you ever pull me up on these? I don't know how to say them.
What? Because I can just do a translation at the end.
While you're listening to this story, you're just typing up all these words that
I have got my notebook open. I was like, okay, very skeptic. Just put that in there. She means skeptical. Yes, because his family at the time were very skeptic, and blah, blah, and I was like, skeptic.
Thank you.
And he observed. You're welcome. I enjoy doing it.
Thank you. Yeah,
that's fun.
Thanks.
Well, thank you very much.
I'm
sorry you had a mild possession during that, but it was hilarious.
Yeah, gosh.
I enjoyed that very much. What time? Cool.
If you have enjoyed listening to our episodes, make sure you rate us and leave us a review on whatever platform you are listening.
We absolutely love hearing from you guys. So you can also help support our show by donating to our Buy Me a Coffee link. We will make sure that you get a massive shout out and a big thank you in our next week's episode.
You can also follow us on social media at Perplexed Podcasts. We're on Facebook, Instagram, and if you want to see more videos and blooper reels, subscribe to our TikTok and YouTube channels.
You can also email us your stories at perplexedpodcasts@gmail.com.
And you can find all the relevant links in the episode descriptions. Thanks for listening. Bye.
Bye.
No school.
Oh God.
I've been possessed.
Oh, it scared the shit out of me then.
Looking over me as well now.
The words "no school." Hello.